$14 billion. That is the number you need to hold in your head. That is what the United States government spent to build a concrete and steel fortress around the city of New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. It is the most expensive, most advanced flood defense system in American history. A 130-mile ring of massive flood walls, mechanical gates, and reinforced levees designed to do one impossible thing: hold back the Gulf of Mexico. The politicians cut the ribbons. The engineers declared the city safe. The headlines called it an impenetrable shield. But right now, that fortress worth $14 billion is fundamentally failing. And it is not failing because a hurricane is battering the walls. It is failing on a quiet Tuesday morning when the sun is shining. Here is the terrifying reality the emergency planners are not telling the millions of tourists drinking on Bourbon Street. The Gulf of Mexico is not just rising over the walls. The city of New Orleans is physically sinking beneath them. The ground is collapsing from the inside out. We built a $14 billion concrete shield to protect a city that is literally dropping into the earth. And when the foundation you are standing on begins to vanish, it does not matter how high you build your walls. So the real question is not whether the levees will hold back the next massive storm. The question is what happens to a major American city when its insurance policy worth $14 billion expires and the ocean finally comes to collect. To understand why the levees are a massive multi-billion-dollar illusion of safety, you have to look down. To the outside world, New Orleans looks exactly like what it has always been: a vibrant, historic hub of culture and commerce, built on the edge of the Mississippi River Delta. But the ground has been sending a warning for years. Just like the terrifying geological collapse happening right now in the Texas Permian Basin, the danger is entirely invisible from the surface. In West Texas, you can stand on hard-packed, desert ground that looks perfectly normal. But beneath that surface, the foundation is hollow. Hollow ground under enough pressure does only one thing: it falls. New Orleans is facing the exact same catastrophic geography. The city was built on soft, porous delta soils, essentially an ancient sponge of mud, water, and organic material. To build neighborhoods and roads, developers pumped the water out. And when you pump the water out of a sponge, the sponge shrinks. The entire city is experiencing massive, accelerating subsidence. New Orleans is sinking by up to 2 inches every single year in some neighborhoods. That sounds like a small number until you realize it is compounding. Year after year, decade after decade. The streets are dropping. The foundations are dropping. The Florida coast is currently facing a similar nightmare, where the porous limestone platform holding up the beaches is dissolving from underneath, hollowing out the foundation of the state. Engineers in Florida are quietly acknowledging a brutal truth: no repair will hold on ground that continues to collapse beneath it. New Orleans is learning that same lesson. We anchored a $14 billion static wall to a city that is moving downward. Every inch the city sinks is an inch the levees effectively lose in height. The wall is not shrinking, but the city it is trying to protect is sinking deeper into the bowl. The Gulf of Mexico is not waiting for us to figure out the math. The arrogance of the New Orleans levee system is staggering, but it is not unique. It is the same hubris that defined the creation of Walt Disney World. In 1966, Disney looked at thousands of acres of unforgiving, waterlogged Florida wetland and decided they would impose complete industrial order on a hydrological system that had functioned on its own terms for thousands of years. They built secret retention ponds, perfectly straight canals, and automatic flow control structures. They were telling water where to go, and water, as Disney would spend the next 6 decades learning, does not like being told where to go. The Army Corps of Engineers looked at the Mississippi River Delta and made the same arrogant gamble. For a century, they treated the Delta like an industrial plumbing project. They built dams, they poured concrete, and they forced the river into a straitjacket, starving the surrounding wetlands of the silt and sediment they needed to naturally rebuild the coast. They destroyed the natural swamps that used to act as speed bumps for incoming hurricanes. They essentially erased nature and built something they thought was better in its place. But swamps have long memories and patience that no engineering budget can outlast. A $14 billion levee network is a frantic, multi-million-dollar war against physics. Inside the city, a massive network of industrial pumps runs constantly, sucking rainwater out of the sinking bowl and pushing it over the walls. It is a mechanical heartbeat keeping an unnatural environment alive. If the power fails, if the pumps stop, the city fills with water on its own. We did not defeat the Gulf of Mexico. We negotiated a temporary truce, and truces have terms. The terms here are straightforward. We have to keep pumping, keep raising the walls, and keep pretending the ground is not vanishing. But nature does not surrender. It probes for weakness at the surface, waiting for the math to stop working. Every time a minor hurricane hits the Louisiana coast and the new levees hold, the politicians exhale. The local news shows footage of the massive metal gates closing to block the storm surge. The headlines immediately called the $14 billion system a total success. The mayor holds a press conference to celebrate the city's resilience. Do not believe the headlines. We saw this exact same psychological trap play out at Hoover Dam. After Lake Mead hit historic lows, a good winter of snowpack pushed the lake levels up slightly. Headlines called it a recovery, and politicians pointed to the rising numbers as proof the system was working. But a 30-foot rise in a lake that is still 140 feet below full is not a recovery. It is a pause. The white ring on the canyon walls keeps climbing because the math underneath that temporary rise has not changed at all. The water came back just enough to make people stop asking the right questions, and that is the most dangerous part of all. The same is true for the New Orleans levees. Surviving a Category 1 or 2 storm is not a victory. It is a pause. The underlying math has not changed. The Gulf of Mexico is warming, expanding, and rising at a faster rate than almost anywhere else on the planet. The city is sinking at the same time. It is a fatal intersection of geological and climate forces. A massive storm surge striking the $14 billion levee system today is hitting a wall that is relatively lower than it was the day it was built. The headlines celebrating the levees are masking the lie. They are measuring a fluke and pretending it is a permanent guarantee. But the math is broken, and every year that passes makes the gap between the height of the ocean and the depth of the city a little wider and a little harder to close. So what exactly did $14 billion buy us? It bought exactly what the Southern Nevada Water Authority bought when they drilled a 3-mile tunnel under a dying Lake Mead. Las Vegas spent $1.4 billion drilling the third straw through solid volcanic rock to reach water sitting at the bottom of a disappearing lake. Critics called it excessive, but for a city in the desert, it was the only way to keep the water flowing. But here is the truth about the third straw. It did not fix the Colorado River. It did not close the gap between what the states demand and what the river actually delivers. It was not a solution. It was a lifeline, and even lifelines have limits. When Las Vegas built that tunnel, they bought something genuinely valuable: time. Time for conservation. Time for policy to catch up with physics. But the tunnel did not solve the desert, and the desert is still winning. The $14 billion levee system around New Orleans is the exact same thing. It is the most expensive, most sophisticated bandage ever placed over a fatal geographical wound. It secured the city against the storms of the past, but it cannot guarantee survival against the storms of the future. The engineers know this. The Army Corps quietly acknowledges that due to sea level rise and land subsidence, the levee system will essentially expire. It will need to be raised again, reinforced again, billions more poured into a concrete perimeter that is slowly being swallowed by the sea. We are caught in an endless escalating arms race against the ocean. The emergency that was supposed to arrive decades from now has a habit of showing up ahead of schedule. The water still flows, the pumps still run, but somewhere beneath the surface of the Gulf, the clock is still running. New Orleans is a city living inside a fortress, slowly sliding into the earth. The pumps are fighting a daily war against gravity. The levees stand firm against an ocean that grows taller every year. The engineering that holds this massive system together is extraordinary, but it is built on an assumption that nature will eventually stop pushing. Nature never stops pushing. In the Philippines, people watch the West Valley Fault accumulate stress for 368 years, knowing the Earth will eventually take back its balance, regardless of the 13 million people living on top of it. The Gulf of Mexico operates with the same patient, relentless indifference. It does not care about our $14 billion in budgets. It does not care about our mechanical gates or our political press conferences. The math does not work. It has never worked. The city is sinking. The sea is rising. The wetlands that used to buffer the coast are gone, turned to open water. The $14 billion gamble bought time. But the gap between what the levees can hold and what the Gulf will eventually deliver has not closed. Every year of delay, every inch of subsidence, marks another scar cut into the geography of the American South. The $14 billion wall is standing, but the Gulf is still rising, the ground is still falling, and the only question that matters now is the one nobody wants to answer. What comes next when the water finally wins? Please note that the specific details about New Orleans, the $14 billion levee system, the city's sinking subsidence, and the rising Gulf of Mexico are drawn from sources outside this video, and you may want to independently verify that information.